Looks like we're going live. People are coming on now. We'll give it, Deputy Coordinator, we'll give this a few minutes for people to come on. We're up over 20 now. And then we'll start. But we very much appreciate you spending the time with U.S. policymakers who will be on this call. I'm sure there will be government people as well. And especially people from across the nation, particularly from the Lebanese American community who care so much about what has gone on in Lebanon this past year. So let me begin. Madam Coordinator, it's a great honor to have you with us, and I really want to thank you on behalf of the American Task Force for Lebanon for agreeing to participate in this important discussion with U.S. policymakers and others that are concerned about the affairs between the United States and the country of Lebanon. Let me begin by talking a little bit about our special guest today, followed by an in-depth presentation by the Deputy Coordinator, Najat Rochdi. And then we'll open up to Q&A. I might start with a couple of questions. So let me just tell the panelists or the participants who are here, if you have a question, you can go to the Q&A section on the bar below the screen and ask away, and we'll try to get to everyone's questions to the extent that they involve the same kind of topic. We'll try to combine them. So let me begin by talking about a friend of mine, Najat Rochdi, Deputy Special Coordinator, Resident for Humanitarian Coordinator for Lebanon. She is the UN Deputy Coordinator for Lebanon, and her boss is just, Jan Kubis has just been announced that he's going to Libya. So I think that puts Najat in the hot seat, at least for the time being. She's already in a hot seat, but it's going to get hotter. She's also UN resident and humanitarian coordinator for Lebanon since August 2020. She brings over 20 years experience in the development and humanitarian assistance and international coordination and conflict resolution areas, including her latest assignment as Senior Advisor to Special Envoy for Syria and Director of Peer-to-Peer with the United Nations Office of Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in Geneva. Prior to this, Najat was Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General and Resident and Humanitarian Coordinator with the United Nations Peacekeeping Mission in Central African Republic. She served as Humanitarian Coordinator in Cameroon and a Deputy Director Representative of the Office of UNDP in Geneva. She's obviously a well-experienced person who likes the hot spots around the world. She seems to attract herself to those places. She has a doctorate in applied math and engineering information systems from the National Institute of Statistics and applied economics in Rabat, a master's degree in mathematics and fundamental applications from the University of Paris. She's fluent in Arabic, English, and French, which of course you need in her homeland of Morocco, but also it's a real key in Lebanon, as we all know. I want to say one personal thing about Najat. I had the honor of working very closely with her when I was U.S. ambassador to Morocco, and she was an advisor to the just elected opposition party prime minister, Youssoufi, who was fairly and freely elected in the first election in which King Hassan allowed the opposition party to come into power. And that probably marks the turning point in modern day Morocco in its movement for towards democracy, reforms, and openness. They've had remarkable moves since then under this new king as well, Mohammed VI. But it really goes back to what we call those golden years when Najat was so important in advising this new opposition government to take a stand and move Morocco in a new direction. I was honored to work with her then, and it's a great honor to welcome you today. So without further ado, Najat, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Edgar. You are so nice to me. And while I am fluent in English, you will still have a sense of a little Frenchy accent from time to time. So I apologize for that. Thank you very much. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be with you today, even if it is virtually. And I hope that when COVID-19 situation will permit, we'll be able also to meet in person and interact and exchange, about the country. I'm also, I have to say, heartened by your strong support and the strong support of United States to Lebanon. I have seen it very concretely and very clearly after the blast, and the United States remains the biggest donor actually for the country. I would like first to speak to you in stark and simple terms about the worsening humanitarian situation we have inevitably reached in Lebanon. I mean, we were referring before just to the Syria crisis impact and then to the blast, but unfortunately we have been beyond that. Since the onset of the popular protests back in October 2019, we have seen the country falling into the abyss. I'm sorry to use that strong statement, but this is really what we are seeing happening now. Undergoing an acute financial and economic crisis that has significantly raised the level of poverty and worsened food insecurity in different parts of the country. It also reinforced structural gender inequalities and reflected overwhelming needs among Lebanese and non-Lebanese communities, including the large refugee population that Lebanon has been generously hosting for years. These are compounded by political tensions, a government stalemate, and a soaring number of COVID-19 cases that recently reached a dramatic point. Yesterday, we had, for example, 71 deaths in one day. The Beirut blast seemed to have been the straw that broke the camel's back, and more Lebanese are planning to leave the country, unfortunately. Every day, we see talented, young Lebanese, educated Lebanese, leaving because they no longer have hope for the future. Their famous resilience has been tested to the limit and is no more valid at this juncture. Disturbingly, we have also seen social tensions growing in many parts of Lebanon. And I am sure you have all followed what happened in Tripoli yesterday and today, with an increased perception of aid bias. The living conditions have become untenable for the people of Lebanon amid liquidity shortages. The recently completed secondary data review showed a severe worsening in people's standards of living, whether in terms of their capacity to afford basic commodities and services, or the availability of such services, including food, health, education, electricity and water supply, solid waste, and wastewater management. These are basic services that constitute a right for every person. So, ladies and gentlemen, in one word, we are in a race against a deteriorating humanitarian situation in a country that is dear to our hearts altogether. A country with which you are maintaining strong ties and want to see structural change at all levels, and that is very much needed. These interconnected and deepening crises placed upon us, the United Nations, its partners, and the international community, the tremendous responsibility towards the most vulnerable people of Lebanon, a responsibility to preserve their dignity, to put an end to their distress and restore hopes in a brighter future. That's why, amid these mounting challenges, we sprang into immediate actions with the support of our partners and the international community and of US, of course, offering urgent humanitarian assistance to unprecedented needs that outpace the capacity of the government alone. Tackling COVID-19 on top of the existing economic crisis and the socio-political challenges made it even more difficult to meet the needs of vulnerable Lebanese and refugees and reach them with life-saving aid. So we launched the Lebanon Emergency Appeal in May 2020, focusing on critical areas of humanitarian interventions to protect the lives of those most acutely at risk. This included, among others, the procurement of essential health services and equipment to vulnerable groups, the rollout of capacity building activities, the build-up of isolation centers and rehabilitation of hospitals wards, in addition to working with frontline health workers and communities to get information out to millions of people. And you know the level of fake news in, circulating in the social media. Guided by our principal value of leaving no one behind that we share, we put the vulnerable refugees and the host communities at the heart of the Lebanon Crisis Response Plan, the LCRP, that constitutes our joint plan with the Lebanese government and other international and national partners to address and respond to the impact of the Syrian crisis in Lebanon. And when the deadly port explosion hit Beirut, we launched a comprehensive flash appeal response plan to help the people of Lebanon receive immediate life-saving humanitarian relief and move towards recovery and reconstruction and eventually to long-term recovery. Meanwhile, we worked closely with the European Union and the World Bank Group on a reform, recovery, and reconstruction framework, the so-called 3RF, as a response to the blast. A roadmap that aims to meet people's critical needs, restore their livelihoods, and safeguard their basic rights, while ensuring that the 3RF programs are delivered through a well-coordinated recovery and reconstruction effort with the active engagement of all stakeholders and the steady support of the international community, especially the involvement of the civil society. We are currently investing all our efforts with the EU and the World Bank to design priority programs and projects and establish suitable, effective, and transparent governance mechanism for the implementation of the 3RF. Governance, jobs, and economic opportunities, inclusive and comprehensive social protection, access to services and infrastructure are the 4 pillars that will inform our priority interventions needed for Lebanon's short-term recovery and reconstruction process in the coming 18 months. The financing of the 3RF will be mobilized from various sources, from the recently established Lebanon Financing Facility under the World Bank supervision, but also from bilateral donors, the private sector, and hopefully from the contribution of the Lebanese diaspora and other new form of crowdfunding. The most urgent priority for us now is to start with the immediate actions required for a people-centered recovery. People should not pay the price of the situation. Winter and rains are here. Small businesses are unable to access finance to restock and recover, and poverty levels are escalating further to the point where more than half of the Lebanese are poor and a quarter of the population is extremely poor for the first time in the history of Lebanon. That's why we continue to highlight to the international community that the supporting and financing of the 3RF, people-centered recovery, the so-called track 1, must come and start quickly, and it must come without conditions. We need to get resources directly in the hands of the people. They deserve to live in dignity, to enjoy their basic human rights. It is a moral imperative and in everyone's interests anyway. So, as you can see, our task is immense and we have an enormous hill to climb. So allow me to tap on where additional help is needed now. Beyond Beirut and the geographical areas affected by the port blast, a close monitoring of the humanitarian situation across Lebanon is urgently required. While the overall picture shows increasing humanitarian needs, there is a lack of granularity of information. And you know that access to data in Lebanon is close to impossible mission. That would hamper our planning of an effective, coordinated, and time-bound humanitarian response. Therefore, we are planning to undertake a countrywide multi-sector needs assessment, an MSNA, to have a comprehensive, clear, and data-solid mapping of the actual needs of people across Lebanon. The results of the MSNA will help the humanitarian and the UN in general with the international community to articulate a more focused and time-bound, and I insist on time-bound because we don't want to set the country into a humanitarian protracted crisis. It has to be a coordinated and multi-sectorial humanitarian response plan in 2021, addressing the specific needs of the Lebanese outside of the impact of the Syria crisis and the impact of the blast of the port. A plan that will help us cover the overwhelming humanitarian needs of the Lebanese that have not yet been met by the current frameworks and plans. All the more, in view of the severity of the impact of the COVID-19 outbreak in Lebanon, we are developing a 6-month operational plan to ensure not only a coordinated support to the government efforts in tackling the COVID-19 crisis, but also, and more importantly, to secure the continuity of basic health care for the most vulnerable groups. And we are witnessing a breakdown in most of the basic services, actually, countrywide. Also, with the potential rapid deterioration of the humanitarian situation and the subsequent security environment, along with the heightened community tensions, the United Nations is starting to identify preparedness action, including disaster preparedness, in response to major risks and dangers that lie ahead, and articulate a detailed contingency plan for scenarios stemming from moderate and high risk factors. So ladies and gentlemen, as Lebanon continues to struggle against these unprecedented simultaneous shocks, we think that a new social contract appears to be the country's path for much needed transformation. People want their fundamental rights and freedoms to be respected. They want to say in decisions and policy making that affect their lives. Creating a new social contract in Lebanon will provide a binding force of mutual rights and duties between the Lebanese government and the Lebanese society at large, where hopefully transparency, accountability, inclusion, and maybe for the first time, citizenship beyond any other reference are at the heart of this mutual commitment. This new social contract should give the people, especially those who have taken to the streets or who feel marginalized, the opportunity to rethink and shape Lebanon's future and to feel that their concerns or needs are addressed. It will enable young people to live with hope and in dignity, will ensure women have the same prospects and opportunities as men, and it will protect the sick, the vulnerable, and minorities of all kinds, far from any instrumentalization or politicization or sectarian decisions. Most importantly, it will help re-establish trust in the political system and national institution and break the vicious circle of corruption. You, as part of the large Lebanese diaspora, but also as one of the most important partners of Lebanon, must be a great enabler to this endeavor. You have been at the forefront of Lebanon's economic survival in previous years and Lebanon's stability, and helped foster development in several ways. We need to make the best use of your great sense of support and citizenship, your strong group consciousness for Lebanon, your idealized and collective memory that always incites you to give and stay connected. We need collectively to harness much needed contribution to rebuild a better Lebanon. So let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, as much as the Beirut explosions were a harsh blow to Lebanon and its people, it still opens a window of opportunity to build back better. And this is where you, along with other crucial actors from government to the civil society, the academia, the private sector, the United Nations, and others, need to step in. The transformation we need requires us to acknowledge that everyone is an important player in Lebanon's recovery. At this pivotal moment, we have a huge responsibility to attenuate the pains of the people of Lebanon, to respond to their needs, concerns, and hopes. The United Nations is moving forward on that front, but we cannot do it alone. We need every support you and others actors can provide. We rely on you to push for action and to influence a new vision for the Lebanon we all want, to help create from far away an environment conducive to good governance, to inclusiveness, to equity, to justice, and to reverse the trend of violence, fear, and injustice. We need development and respect for human rights. And I can assure you, you can count on us too. With today's discussion, I am hoping to reach the commonalities on how to usher in an improved way of coordinating your support to Lebanon and its people, be it through your skills support, your knowledge, your advocacy, and why not, your lobbying and your financing. My lesson learned since I came here, 1st of August, is that the Lebanese are the master of the art of making the impossible possible, but also, unfortunately, making the possible impossible. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Coordinator. I can see from your presentation, you haven't missed a beat in the last 20 years since we worked together so long ago. And actually, your time in those hot spots across the world have obviously prepared you well for Lebanon. We are very lucky to have a person of your skill in Lebanon as UN Deputy Coordinator. Thank you. I'm going to ask a few questions. We've got a slew of them already coming in, and we hope to get to all of them. But I want to focus on 3RF, if I may, which I find very interesting. As you know, ATFL and many of our diaspora and other nonprofits in America have become very involved in humanitarian aid to Lebanon. We were responsible for, I think, one of the first flights into Lebanon, which brought an initial $12 million in medicine and needed medical supplies. I think our community is well over 40 million now in various containers that have gone, and it's probably more than 24 organizations, and with the people, it's in the hundreds. And we continue to do that. One of the concerns, though, that has come up, and Rhonda Slim really mentions this in her question, and I think Hillel does as well, and that is, how do we deal with the people and ensure that this kind of aid is not going to corrupt government agencies? As a matter of fact, the Lebanese diaspora in America refuses to give us any aid if it goes through a Lebanese government agency. And as Rhonda says, how to put in place to make sure that old practices of international assistance funding wasted to corruption institutions are not repeated again.
Well, that was the concern actually of all the international community when we issued the flash appeal for the response to the blast. And actually they made it very clear that nothing should be channeled through the government or the government institutions. And that's exactly what happened. We have been working with a number of local NGOs who are really very good. And we were very, very careful, making sure that everything was done according to the humanitarian principles, meaning impartial, independent, and neutral. And I am mentioning that because, as you know, there are also a number of confessional, NGOs where obviously they wanted also to direct the assistance to their communities. So that was one of the challenges we were really facing. So we came up really with a system where actually the aid was going directly in the hands of the beneficiaries without going through the government, local authorities, or public institution. We have worked very closely with the Red Crescent, the Lebanese Red Crescent, and I really need to give them the credit and to acknowledge the great work they have done. I have been myself contacted by a number of people from the diaspora, and I always actually provided them with some names of local NGOs, because it is important also for the population to see that they are getting the support also from their own people and not only from the international community, because in itself, it's a way also to cheer them up and for them not to feel completely abandoned. And actually all the funding that came through UN, I cannot tell you about the funding that was channeled through other means. Nothing was through the government, nothing. One, because anyway, that was a requirement from the international community. And second, by that time, there was absolutely no capacity within the government anyway to handle that. What we have done though, because the army, the Lebanese army was involved in the delivering of the humanitarian assistance, and because we did not want to have any duplication, we set up a kind of joint operation room where actually we were working. We had our people there sitting with them along with the LRC, and we were working and planning and coordinating together every day. There has been some tensions in the beginning because they are not very much familiar, of course, with the way humanitarian assistance is happening. And one of the things was always, the list of beneficiaries. But we stood our grounds, and we were very clear that this is the way we select, this is the way we identify, and those are our criteria. We are not getting into your business, but we are telling you this is the right way to do it. That said, there has been some serious challenges in terms of coordination. Really, really very, very serious challenges of coordination. A lot of aid came to Lebanon, frankly, a lot. And I have to really acknowledge an amazing international solidarity not only from the diaspora, but really from across the world. Everybody really responded to the appeal. But at the same time, we have seen also a mushrooming of new local NGOs, and nobody really could understand from where they were coming. And we were not involved, of course, in coordinating the work of some of the local NGOs. So it is important, and that's why I was also insisting in my statement that it's so important that we all, contribute to the coordination. Saying that does not mean that all the funding should go to the UN. Absolutely not. And please, please, your NGOs have done an amazing job. And I am a witness, and I have seen them doing an amazing job in Lebanon, the way I have seen them doing an amazing job elsewhere. But it's so important that we coordinate our efforts. It's so important. I have to say that was not always the case right after the blast. Over.
We look forward to delving a little more into this with you and seeing how we can join with you. I think one of the biggest questions that we have, though, is, look, Hillel brings us up, Halil, I should say, and Jean Abinader, who runs our humanitarian program, and Manal Saab, who's also involved with us. They are so frustrated when product comes into the port, the airport or the seaport, and they get held up for weeks for no reason. Thank God for the LAF, because they've interceded several times at our request. General Joseph Aoun is a remarkable leader for the LAF, but we need a process, and we really need help in this regard. It's frustrating. It's turning off the donor community. How can you help us in that regard?
Well, I had to intervene personally as the humanitarian coordinator for many, international NGOs based on the request I got from their countries, as a donor. And there is a process, and that's what we call, and there is a process as part of the humanitarian rules, tools, and everything. And all the tools are available. The problem is that it took us a hell of time and energy, that just to explain to them that, first of all, this is international aid. So therefore, the custom process is completely different from the normal custom procedure, when anything is coming from outside to the country. And it took us a hell of time until actually we scaled up that to the highest level of decision, and to General Joseph Aoun. I mean, the second thing is the sense of the emergency. I mean, everybody knew that it was urgent. Nevertheless, the bureaucracy did not really take it into account. And we came up with some processes where actually when we had the information, we were alerting the authorities that this plane is coming with those products, with this assistance at this time. And this is the manifest, because of course they will always tell us, but there is a smuggling, there is this, there is that. So we still need to verify. So we started sending our own people there to ask them actually to be present whenever we were informed of actually a plane or a boat. I mean, because we had the same issues through the port of Beirut that was coming. I am sure we have not been able to fix everything, and we have not been able to address all the needs, but actually everything is there. I mean, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. They just need to accept it as this is the way they should proceed. Over.
Thank you. Let me ask you a question. Is there a way for ATFL to formally fit under your umbrella, or find a formality of partnership with you that would help us in terms of having some kind of coordinated effort when these goods come in, not only to coordinate on what we're doing, but under your umbrella, perhaps to have a smoother operation when we go through customs. Is that a possibility to formalize with an NGO like in America, like ours?
Well, that would, there is a due diligence and all of that. And sorry, I mean, that's the bureaucracy also of UN. We are not better than others when it comes to that. The best way is to do it through is that we get a request from the embassy, the US embassy here. That will be the best way. Because otherwise we'll have to go through, oh my God, through a whole process, where you have to go and feel, please don't get there. I mean, really, again, time is of the essence. We are already working with a number of American NGOs. I don't know who are the NGOs who are under your umbrella, but actually we already work, in the humanitarian arena with a number of US NGOs. Those who are not part of, the database of partners we have, my advice to you to be very clear, please do it through the US embassy here.
Well, it gives me a chance to also talk about our ambassador there as well, who has been very supportive. Dorothy Shea has been very supportive of ATFL's efforts. And when I say ATFL, I mean as a coordinator for so many NGOs that are working in concert together. So we will take your advice up. We would like to create a smoother operation through perhaps the embassy and in coordination with you. So that's very helpful. Let me see if there are other questions here before I go back to my own. Okay, I think we had one from Joe Jabali. It was lost. Joe, if you're still with us, let us know. Let me also say that there are probably U.S. State Department folks on this call. They've been very helpful and been a great partner with us. So my hope is that they're taking good notes as well. I do have a question from Joe Jabali with the Lebanese Information Center. Tell us about the NPTP role in helping the needy Lebanese at this juncture. And regarding data collection, which you did bring up, which is important, are you relying on Lebanese government data, which is probably, as you know, somewhat biased, maybe unreliable? And so how are you going about that data collection effort as well? Those two questions from Joe.
Okay. It has been a long process, and we have been doing a lot of cash assistance through the MPTP, but also through other direct cash assistance. There is still, I'm going to be very frank with you, and you know me, Ed, I did not change from that point of view. I'm still very direct and very frank, because for me, what matters is really to support the people, and that's what matters. We are still having some issues in terms of identification of the list of beneficiaries. We have shared with them the criteria, and we are working along with the World Bank, because this is also one of the projects for the social safety net to also provide some cash assistance to the poorest. There are two components. You have the emergency component until the component that is going to cover the whole country is fixed. One issue that is still not fixed is a central registry, where obviously there you will have who are the beneficiaries, why they are beneficiaries, where do they live, and all of that. That is work in progress. The government has told us that actually the army, who obviously is much more trusted than anyone in the government, the army conducted a survey, and the army identified actually countrywide all those in need, and the army has used the criteria we provided for the MPTP, but also for the social safety net. The discussion now is the verification. Are we going to verify all those, we are talking about ultimately 800,000, 900,000 Lebanese. And if we want to go through a thorough verification of 900,000 Lebanese, I think by the time we will be done, well, the country will have completely blown up. So we have to come up with something that makes sense, where we are still sure that there is no politicization of this aid assistance, obviously, and that nobody is going to divert the aid to their communities at the expense of those who really needs it. But at the same time, to come up with a process that will still help us, go ahead very quickly. So we agreed to start with the list that we already have and which is already verified, which is covering something like 150,000 people. For the rest, we are still discussing. To be very honest with you, we are very, very firm, because as you know, WFP is in charge of this cash assistance, because WFP in UN is really the cash assistance experts, and they have the tools and the expertise for this card, this card which actually will be provided to the beneficiaries for them to have access to this cash assistance. And this is a system that is completely mastered, and they know exactly how to do it. And we already deployed it as a response to the blast. So this is where we stand. We are monitoring very closely, and we are with the World Bank, not only us, with the World Bank. And the World Bank is also on top of making sure that no diversion of aid is going to happen. Over.
Thank you. From the compliments I'm seeing on the screen about your answers, I think we're going to have a number of people who want to join together in a letter to the Secretary General to make sure you stay in Lebanon for some time to come. You are highly complimented by a number of people. Let me ask you, what are the priority donations that you want to see from the Lebanese American community in the next year? And what are your priorities in the next year that coincide with that other question? What are the donations?
As I said in the beginning, we are really seeing a worsening of a number of needs. And I think I mentioned already food, health, but we have also serious issues when it comes to protection. Either protection from sexual violence, protection from sexual exploitation and abuse, and unfortunately there are cases, access to basic services. I am very concerned about the caseload of children who are dropping off the school, which for me is totally jeopardizing the future of the country. I mean, if there are three things you used to think immediately when you say Lebanon, it's education, it's health, and it's banking system. And today, in 2021, the three have collapsed. So it's very important that we preserve that and that we keep it, working. So for me, those are really, really the most urgent priorities. There is a real shortage in terms of medicine for chronic disease. And I know that, and thanks for your support when we have made this appeal after the blast, you were among those who sent actually medicine for that. We have again a shortage now, and this is going to worsen because of the lack of availability of liquidity and dollars, because import has to be done in dollars. There is also a shortage in terms of medical items, simple things like a respirator and a ventilator. I mean, and we have been, as UN, really supporting that. Lately, I heard that, I don't know if it was you or someone else, they were like small machines, respirator, which actually are saving lives, So we are not talking only about ICU bed. We are talking also about small medical items which can really save lives. It's all of that. It's really all of that. We are starting seeing also very worrisome, trends in terms of malnutrition, which obviously always come with food insecurity. I mean, you have food insecurity, you have malnutrition. And today, for example, I got a call from colleagues in the nutrition sector telling me that there is a real shortage of the what they call it, the milk for the babies. Obviously, this has to be administered with caution because as United Nations, we prefer the breastfeeding, but at the same time, I mean, if they are already on this milk, then it has to be provided. So it really comes to those simple things, but which are really becoming more and more and more urgent needs. That's for the immediate priorities. And actually, it's not only for the Lebanese. I can tell you that the situation of the refugees is really heartbreaking. They have lost 80% of their capacity, capacity to cope, and it's really heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking. Over.
Thank you, Najat, Madam Coordinator. Let me ask you a question. When you described your priorities and then you also talked about what we can donate, you mentioned food. What is the position of the UN? Do you need food from overseas, or are you looking at really helping farmers develop what they need on the ground there and also dealing with food vouchers? There's some debate about whether or not we should be shipping food to Lebanon or not. What's your view on that?
Listen, in an acute crisis, we always ask food in the beginning of the crisis, you know, because there is no other way. I mean, people, for example, let me give you the example of the blast. Right after people lost their houses, they could not cook, they could not eat. So it was very important to provide them with food rations, obviously. But very quickly, we moved actually to food cash assistance. One, then they are given the choice to eat what they want and not actually what we distribute, which in itself is important. And I will never forget, you know, this man, a proud man, who told me that for him, it was so important actually to leave home, to go and buy the things and come back with the box of things and a bag of things, so he could feel that he was fulfilling his role as the breadwinner, you know? So in itself, it's very important. Of course, it is important to help the farmers, but that is more of a middle term, Ed. I mean, you cannot, by the time you will finally have production, people would have died from lack of food. So we need to find a balance between food in the beginning, and it's always very important, then cash assistance to help people recover, you know, and obviously in parallel, invest actually in seeds and other things with the farmers. And we are starting actually that through the WFP and FAO programs, where this is really one of what we called the recovery programs. So it is there. You know, I think one of the tragedy of Lebanon is that a lot of Lebanese actually abandoned the agriculture and abandoned their fields. So if we are really to help the production and the agriculture to somehow not really reach total autonomy, because that will take some years to get there, but it is really important to revive actually this interest and to make sure that we still have farmers who are going to address those needs. Over. You are muted. You are muted.
Thank you, Najat. We have a number of questions that have come in now. I'll go up and see if we can hit them all. I'm going to give you two at a time because we're quickly running out of time. Have you been working with local, this is from Akram Abu Khalil. Have you been working with local and multinational companies within the country to buy goods to distribute supplies? Secondly, what's the percentage of the UN budget for education in Lebanon that's dedicated for the Lebanese students versus refugees? Those two questions.
Whenever we can use the local markets, we do it, because from our point of view, this is also a way to contribute to the revival of the local economy, and it's a way also to support the local suppliers. We have been able to do it for a number of things, definitely when it came to food items, and there was a lot here, but also, for example, when we needed the glasses, the aluminum, the wood, and all of that. But obviously, the needs were far, far beyond, the needs for the restoration and reconstruction. But our approach is always to privilege, of course, the local suppliers. For the multinational or international, we have done it again for the glasses, for example, and because we needed much more than whatever was available in the local market. So we called on some multinational and some international companies through their through the embassies of the countries of origin. I mean, if we can call a country of origin of an international company, and that also helped. And sometimes it was also part of the in-kind, actually, aid and assistance the countries were sending to Lebanon. The percentage that goes to the Lebanese compared to the refugees, I don't know what you mean. Is it the Lebanese in general or the host communities? As you know, in terms of the Syria crisis response, wherever we have refugees, we don't distinguish our support between the refugees and the Lebanese host communities. So that's our approach, and that will remain our approach. We have not provided humanitarian assistance to those who are not host communities so far, because we did not have before actually 2020, and obviously now, purely humanitarian needs for Lebanese. So this is something that we are working on, and going back to what I said about the MSNA, I'm very much counting if the State Department people are there, and I know you have always been supporting. So, wait for me. I'm coming back to you with the new needs for the Lebanese.
Great. So that last, I should have mentioned, last question was from Kathy Figali. Here's an important question for you. This is from George Abel-Noor. Is there a way to work with local municipalities in humanitarian relief? They seem to command limited trust from Lebanon citizens. They seem to command trust from Lebanon citizens and are also easier to hold accountable. What's your answer to that, please?
We have worked with local municipalities. We have done that, not with all of them, because those really corrupted are known. So we avoided, obviously, but we have done that. For example, with municipality of Mount Lebanon, some municipalities also in Beirut. So yes, we have worked with them. Can we work with all municipalities? Definitely not. Are there some municipalities with whom we can work? Definitely yes.
So let me ask you a question, which is dear to my heart. Thank you for the great presentation. According to Hassan Sharif, do you see any change in U.S. policy towards Lebanon with this new administration?
Well, I think it's too early for me to see, but I definitely hope.
I can say that it was very difficult after the blast to mobilize humanitarian aid from our country, and it's something that this administration better step up to and do a better job at. Although, as you said, they're the #1 provider of aid in the country. I don't want that to go by the wayside. But during that crisis, it took us weeks to get government aid there.
Yeah, and it was the case of most of the government. But let me tell you one thing that I always say. I understand that the US administration does not want to work with everybody. That I understand. My point is that the humanitarian aid, more than the other aids, I fully support that when it comes to big, investment in development, this has to be conditioned with reforms. But when it comes to the most vulnerable, when it comes to the poorest, if we don't assist them, it means simply that they are the ones sanctioned, not those who should be sanctioned.
Thank you, Najat. We have 2 remaining questions. I'm going to give them both to you. One is from Alia Mubayed, Thank you again. Appreciate the presentation. Well, cash assistance and expanding social safety net is critical to help the most vulnerable. The concomitant challenge is to prevent more people from falling into poverty because of absence of reforms or incompetence in policymaking. In particular, can you kindly speak to how we ensure the international community helps the private sector institutions, notably in import, substitution, and export sectors, afloat and strengthen the resilience, excuse me. Why don't we just go with that first, and then the last question will be from Michael Haj.
We have prioritized the support to the private sector and especially to the micro, small, and medium enterprises, in the 3RF, in the recovery. And actually part of the emergency programs, which are not conditioned, because the emergency programs are not conditioned, is to try to help them stand back on their feet. But the real recovery, let's not kid ourselves, that will come only with reforms. I mean, whether we like it or not, there is a need for structural reforms. If we don't fight corruption, if we don't have, a clear, transparent procedure for all, the public procurement, if we don't have a judiciary system that is really independent and doing the job, so whenever there is any issue or any problem, they will really do their job. If we don't have accountability, whatever we'll do will be just putting, someone is bleeding, so we are stopping the bleeding, but we are not treating the injury. Yes, we will keep doing that. That's exactly what we do as humanitarian. We stop the bleeding, but to treat the injury, for Lebanon really to be back better, reforms are necessary. And social safety net, again, alone is not going to make it. We need a full-fledged social protection, meaning universal health coverage. That's the way you make sure people have access to health, no matter from where they come. You need a real energy plan, and you need to address corruption in energy, in electricity. For God's sake, in the 2021, Lebanon has still electricity cuts. I mean, this is a high middle income country compared to other low middle income country where they have electricity 24/7. I mean, there are things that needs to be addressed that cannot be addressed with humanitarian assistance, that cannot be addressed with recovery. It will be addressed by the Lebanese and by a very strong political will.
Well, and you speak with authority. Look at what Morocco did following the Yousfi government in terms of electrifying its country 24/7. We really appreciate your feelings on this. The last question is from Michael Hodge, basically saying we tend to go to the same old NGOs. And during this period, important actors have emerged, new partners. His group, Solidarity, is one of these new NGOs that's extending its hand to collaborate with the World Food Program and others to ensure efficiency and avoid duplication. And I'm sure that what he'd like you to do is think about how do we reach out to these new organizations and make sure that some of these innovative programs are being looked at as well, rather than going to the same old donor-based organizations.
I fully agree, and all the good intention and goodwill are more than welcome. Lebanon needs everybody. My immediate answer would be, please ask your people to reach out to me.
Amen. Well, you have been an amazing person on this call today. Your knowledge, your commitment, and your passion has all come through very strongly. I'm sure there are many policymakers on this call that now have new ideas. We surely do in terms of how we want to work more closely with you, Madam Coordinator. Thank you so much for this hour together, and we hope it's the beginning of a long relationship with you and and the UN. And we hope we're going to be able to break some bread in Lebanon together over dinner, whether it's a Moroccan or Lebanese meal. We look forward to it. So thank you so much for this time today. And I must say the audience all hung in there today. We didn't have anybody drop off, which was quite amazing. That's a tribute to you.
It's a tribute to Lebanon. And I think we are all sharing the same commitment and love for this country. This is the unique country where we have a chance to reverse the trend. And I believe this is possible, provided, of course, all what needs to be done is done. And you can count on me, and you can count on the whole support and commitment of United Nations. Thank you, and God bless you.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much, Najat. Take
Thanks.
care.
Bye.
Bye.